Hello, happy Saturday or Sunday for those of you in Australia, New Zealand area. Hello, welcome. I wanted to do a bonus live stream or a few bonus live streams or videos throughout the month of July because it's a rough draft challenge. And I feel like in April, we didn't have any extras other than just the sprints. And want us to feel more connected to it, but I only have so much capacity. So I was like, let's see if we can go live a few times and just have conversations and support each other when it comes to how do we get through this dang draft? How do we actually reach our goals? How do we stop giving up and keep turning to something new, thinking it's going to be easier? So, in the comments, if you want to let us know where you're joining from and where you are in your draft. I saw somebody who was always like, I'm not working on a book right now, which is fine too. But for those of you who are participating in the Rough Draft Challenge, what are you writing? Where are you in your manuscript? So we are 11 days into the Rough Draft Challenge, which means we're just a few days away-ish, less than a week away from being halfway through. So we're in that sort of in between the beginning and the halfway point. And this is where it can start to feel a little bit less exciting, a little bit more difficult or daunting, and where, first of all, either other things can begin to start to take our attention, or we can start to think we made the wrong choice. This isn't the right book. This isn't the one I'm supposed to be working on. Or we can just lose track in terms of, I was so excited at the beginning, and now I just have a million other things going on in my life and I've lost the momentum. So if you're in any of those stages or something that I haven't mentioned, go ahead and let us know in the comments and we will say hello to everybody. Hey, Louisa, thanks for having this session. I think it's going to be a good like brain fog. It's been a busy day already. I'm in between. So today is my husband George's birthday. He is younger than me, if you were wondering. He is 3 years younger than I am. So he's still in his mid 40s. But we've been celebrating him all day. And then tomorrow in the morning, I leave for Minneapolis, St. Paul, with a bunch of friends to go on a mastermind retreat. So I'm going to be doing lots of thinking and strategizing and hanging out and stuff this upcoming week, but I am trying to pack and I'm trying so hard to get everything into one suitcase because I keep telling myself it's 2 days, like it's 2 travel days, 2 masterminding days, and then I have 1 day where I'm going to be meeting up with some other friends in Minneapolis. So I should be able to fit it all in one suitcase, but I am a classic overpacker. So Lake Charles, Louisiana, working on edits and plot holes. Okay, sounds good to me. From Atlantic Canada, knee deep in developmental edits for book 1 of my debut contemporary romance series. That's so exciting, Louisa. I'm here from Manitoba, Canada. I'm at the gross middle part of the draft. This will be the hopefully perfect conversation for you today because gross middle part of the draft is my nemesis as well. Hello, Paladina from Washington, in developmental edits and using the challenge to finish them. Kat, 7th book of a 7-book series, still on chapter 4 of 32. 7-book series. This is so exciting. You're on the finale. Hey, Jenna from Seattle, working on the first draft of my YA historical thriller. Oh my gosh, I need to read this. Watching from Arkansas, spending the month refilling my creative well, currently crocheting a hat, preparing my Etsy shop for autumn. I love it. Oh my gosh, you need to send me a link to your hats. Super hot in Utah and millionth editing phase. Susie. I know that feeling. Canada, just starting Act 2, Part 1, and I'm stuck. So you're kind of in that middle Part 2, letting the fear of Act 2 take over. We're going to talk about why does this happen? And for some of us, why does this happen every single time? And for some others of us, why does this happen? And I immediately think, I'm writing the wrong thing and I need to write something else. And there's this shiny new idea that is calling to me that's probably the right one, right? Why does this happen? Western Canada, hey, drafting new chapters of an already written and revised book. So 4 new chapters. That sounds really fun. I need to revise and redo Deep Dark Secrets. It's been on my list for like 2 years. Super hot in Idaho. It's hot here. It's 95 degrees here. Somebody sent me the weather for Minneapolis and they were like, it's going to be so hot. And it's like 84 high. And I was like, haha, cry, hashtag cries in Texas. Cause it's like been 103 here all week. from the UK, 27K into my current main project. It's been rocky and I've had to stop a few times. So is 27 about midway, or are you still just coming out of that first act? It's like 27K, depending on what you're writing, could be more than halfway, or it could be not quite even to the end of the first act. So Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, working on plotting book 8 of my series. That's a huge accomplishment. Just taking the month to focus more on writing, trying to figure out how to balance 2 projects at the same time, one fantasy and one archaeological thriller. Those, because of the 2 different genres that are so different, I'm sure that's interesting, right? And we can kind of talk about this too, not that you asked a question, but does it help when you reach a hard point in one book to switch to another book? And that can be a tactic that can help you, but it can also be a big derailment. So it matters what your preferences are, what your skills are, and kind of how your brain works. Because this is one thing that I have noticed. Oh, look at all the happy birthdays. I love you guys. Thank you for that. One thing I've noticed over years of having best friends who are authors and working with so many authors is that we're all different. And some people juggle multiple projects at once, like it's their lifeblood, like they need to. And other people, if you try to write 2 things at once, it's just going to kill your creativity and make you feel overwhelmed. And I think one of the most disservice kind of things that coaches do to authors, and sometimes books about writing do to authors, is try to convince us that there's only one way. And then we feel guilty if we're doing it our way and it's working. Like, oh, why is this working? It shouldn't be working. I need to try something that everybody says is tried and true. But hopefully, one thing that we all know here on Heart Breathings is that there's a million paths to success, and there's a lot of different paths to done and to doing it the right way, because it's the right way for you and not the right way for like how authors are supposed to do it. And it doesn't matter if there's PhD programs that try to tell you that this is the only way to do it. This is the way that I have come to know and work with authors over and over and over again, thousands of authors through the years, is everybody has their own unique way. And it can be so helpful to use other people's way of doing things as a jumping off point. But this is also why I think it's so valuable for people to come in and give their perspective here in the comments and on YouTube and other things like that, because you never know when your comment about how you do something is going to give someone else who's watching permission to do it their way. Like, oh, I didn't know I could be working on 2 different genres, 2 books at the same time, and figuring out how to balance. Like, I didn't know I had permission to do that. And so just a little pep talk there. Hey, I haven't had a chance to actually sit down and write, which makes me sad because I had this big plan and prep and then life happened. Yeah. And I'm sure you're not alone with that. And that was me in April, right? And that's why we do it all the time. It's Rough Draft Challenge is not ever meant to be something that makes you feel like a failure or like you're not doing enough. It's always just meant to be a tool that if you want to use it, it's great motivation. And then if it turns out now is not the right time, no big deal. It'll come around again. You can do it again next month if you want. It's all good. Hey, Angela, I'm closer to the beginning than the middle, I think, but jumping around also. So I am currently kind of in that 10 to 15,000 word slog where I'm getting towards the end of the first act. And now it's starting to feel a little more difficult. So we're going to talk about this a little bit. I know I can't pull up everybody's comments, so I'm just going to fast forward to the end. So let's talk about why. Why does this happen? Hey, Casey. So for one, our brains are not necessarily programmed for long-term focus, right? We are meant to be searching for safety. We're meant to be searching for how to use the least amount of effort to reach our goals. Like that's survival instinct, basic brain is not about like, let me work on this project for years and years. It's really meant to be, how can I find the most efficient way to do things to conserve my energy? How can I keep myself safe? And so when we talk about writing books, even though there's nothing inherently dangerous about it. There's no lions and tigers and, starvation and other things, although some people have been known to not eat because they get so hyper-focused. So that does happen. But for the most part, it's not actually dangerous. But our brains and our nervous systems can perceive writing as dangerous for a couple of reasons. One, that it's going to give us more visibility. We're creating something that in general, not everybody here wants to publish or have other people read their books, but in general, most of us are writing something that we hope other people are going to read. And so we have this sort of danger to our in our nervous system that says, "Oh my gosh, you're actually doing the thing. You're 27,000 words in, you're 40,000 words in, you finished a draft." Whatever stage you're in when you hit that fear, because it can be different for different people. And our brains go, "This is dangerous because you're getting closer to the point where someone else is gonna read this, and what if it's crap?" And this is why I started with a conversation about imposter syndrome, and I didn't get to go live for that just because of a family obligation. Andrew ended up having a baseball game that we didn't have on the schedule, so I couldn't go live, but hopefully some of you were able to watch my video, that was like I was like, I'm gonna do like a 15 or 16-minute video," and it was 55 minutes, I think, so we just embrace our over talking and it's fine. But that's one reason that the writing starts to become hard is because in the beginning, it feels all possibility. It feels all excitement. We have this exciting idea in our head and we come across the emotional and nervous system side. Thank you. Emily said it was so good. We come across this emotional nervous system side where we say, or somewhere in our subconscious, we think 15 minutes is 15 minutes and say 50 minutes is 15 minutes. I love it. It's kind of like saying like 50 is the new 35, you know? Anyway, our brain perceives it as dangerous because we're putting ourselves in a visible place. And it is that danger of what if it's not good enough? What if it's not right? All of that. So that's one bundle that comes up, even if we don't fully know that that's what's happening. It's like, oh, all I know is I'm resisting it. I don't want to do it. But somewhere in the back of our subconscious, it's saying, danger, danger. Somebody's going to read this. They're going to judge you. They're going to find out that you're a fraud or that you're not any good. And this isn't, any good. And, part of this, and I didn't get a chance to say this on the imposter syndrome talk, so I'll just add it in here before we start moving into like tools and things like that, is that we've been trained since we were kids to judge our writing. This writing is an A, and this writing is a C, and that writing is a failure. Like, I remember going to college, and I was a double major in vocal performance and opera and English. And I remember my very first essay in college, I was so nervous, and I felt like I didn't really belong there. I'm at a top 15 university. I come from this small town where we really didn't even read a lot of the classics that most people read. I definitely felt like an imposter. So I'm writing my very first essay and I put so much work into it. I'm usually an overnight, anybody else like a procrastinator until the very last minute and you're writing your essays like the night before. That is uh that's typical Sarah, but I was so nervous. I was like, "Okay, I need to get in there and work on this for months so I can make sure it's the best thing it can be." I don't even think we had months, but I think we had 6 weeks to work on it. I get it back, and it's my first, like, ever bad grade on a like, my college scale. I was terrified, and she had all these red marks of, like, "This is the dumbest title, like, why would you do this? Why would you do that?" And I did find out later that this is just that professor's style, like, she gives everybody bad grades on their first essay, and I still ended up getting an okay grade in the class, but it was I thought, "I'm never again gonna start working on something early," because, that was terrible. However, there's that feeling of, like, I'm not sure I fit in, so I'm gonna work really hard, but someone else is gonna be grading this, and we always know that when we're in school, right? There's gonna be a grade at the end of this where someone is gonna judge whether it's good or it was bad, whether it lived up to their expectation and my potential or not. And even though we're not in school anymore and we're just looking to put our book on Amazon or for friends and family to read it, some of us are still gonna get that sort of school feeling because you're gonna submit to agents and you're gonna get a yes or a no and a I loved this or this isn't for me. And so I think that training from really early on in our schooling continues to rear its ugly head. But our art, like the truth of it is that it's subjective. One person might think it's the best book, and this is a perfect example, and I wish I had a screenshot of it, but it's somewhere in the bowels of some computer. I don't know if I could still find it. But when I had book 6 of my series came out 2012, and it was I was so nervous if people were gonna like it because at the time, it was the conclusion of the series arc, and there was one review that got posted, 5 stars, the very best book in the series. Right underneath it, a one-star review that says, "This is the worst book in the series." And I screenshotted it because I thought, this is the truth of the final product of our writing. People are going to judge it. But what it's gonna be what one person's favorite is someone else's disappointment, and when this ties back into this feeling of why every first draft feels awful, why we end up giving up or we feel like it's the worst thing we've ever written, is because that's when the inner critic starts to kick in. Once we've made a little bit of progress and the writing starts to get a little bit harder, it kicks in that like, "Oh my gosh, there's a reality that at the end of this, someone else is going to judge it, like they're grading it, like they're grading a paper in college or in high school. And now I have something to be nervous about because what if they don't like it?" And we can't really control that. But at the same time, there will be people who don't like it, but there will also be people who love it. And so letting ourselves stop the process of creating the art because we're afraid someone isn't going to like it, it's a valid feeling, but it's not really a great reason to stop. And if we could just convince our nervous systems and our bodies that it's not worth quitting, that would be so like, I wish we could, and I know it's a reality of this business is that there are gonna be people judging, but I think we've been trained for so long that it's this objective thing. It's either an A paper or it's a D paper, when in reality, it's gonna be someone's favorite and someone's least favorite. Someone's gonna think it was brilliant, and someone's gonna think it was juvenile. Somebody's gonna think it was so well written and it kept them up all night, and someone else is gonna say, "I DNF'd this after chapter 1." And if we're afraid of that, it it's gonna come one way or another. It's just, did you put it out there so that the person who's gonna love it will love it, or did you just never put it out there at all? And eventually, if you can get to a point where you say, "Well, I'd rather it be hated by one person and loved by 1,000 than no one ever read it." And that's gonna be up to you and your, personal growth to say, which one is it gonna be for me? So that's one piece of it, is that imposter syndrome, that fear, that knowledge that kicks in once you've made a little bit of progress that says, this is not cool. Someone's gonna judge this." Another piece of it, though, is what Ira Glass calls the taste gap. So if you're not familiar with this, Ira Glass does, I think it's a podcast, right? It's like This American Life, and talks about this idea of the taste gap, where it's like you have excellent taste in books, and that is the thing that makes you want to write. You have authors that you have looked up to your whole life, books that were your favorite books, and you love them. And then you have these ideas that you think, "Oh my gosh, I want to write a dystopian, or I want to write a historical, or I want to write a mystery." And you imagine it on your, when you first start writing it and you start plotting it and you start coming up with it, there's there's this idea that like maybe it can be that good. When we actually start executing it, though, sometimes our skill to just be able to write it, I mean, almost no one can just write it and it's perfect right out the bat, right? So we begin writing it, and naturally beginnings are where we're going to fumble the words when we're just discovering the stories. Like, by nature, a rough draft is rough. It's discovery. It's figuring out the story as you go. But we have in our heads this comparison of our rough draft to the completed things that we loved that we're trying to create, or the idea of what this story has the potential to be in our heads. And so we're feeling the gap between those, of these rough, bumbling words on the page that are not coming out at all like I thought. The story isn't going in the direction I thought. It's not any good, whatever those doubts are, versus what hopes we had for this story, the things that we wanted it to be, or the comparison of other people's completed stories and thinking this is better than what my skill is capable of. And so those are kind of two of the big things that we come across. And then in addition, this idea that our brains are looking to conserve energy and to keep us safe. And long-term projects, long-term creative projects is not really what our brains are wired to do. So this is where a piece of discipline comes in. So this is sort of what I consider the eagle eye view. And if you have any other perspective that you think this is also the thing that holds me back in comparison to those three things, let me know, put it in the comments. I'm going to pull up a few comments because I'm trying so hard to keep to my point, but then also read the comments at the same time. Typical me, 24 hours before the deadline, even better if I do actual prep and find resources just to not use any of them. I love it. Always last minute. That's like pressure creates diamonds. That was me. And that was the only paper I ever started early, and it was my only bad grade. Speaking of fear of being seen, I'm posting my cereal on Royal Road, and I just got a 3rd follower and my 1st favorite. Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. Send me a link. Send me a link. I don't have a lot of time to read on Royal Road, but I would love to go support you if I can. I read a romance and I loved it, but other readers are giving it 2 stars. Yes, yes, yes. A book that changed my life. My book club didn't like it. Exactly, exactly. There is no objective, this book was great, this writing was great. And really because of that lack of grading scale, I mean, there's opinions, but there's no like scoreboard that's going to say here, probably someone will create it with AI, but we can just say we can ignore that. However, art is subjective by nature. It always is going to be subjective. And so if we're seeking perfection and we're seeking everyone liking it, we're going to fail at that regardless. And so sometimes that's what keeps us from putting ourselves out there. And at some point you just have to get over it and say, I know that people might not like it, but I'm going to find the readers who will. And, this is, I didn't exactly mention this I'm going to bring this up. Thank you. I didn't mention this in that original imposter syndrome video either, but when I first decided to self-publish, back then I was still speaking to my mom, and I thought she was going to be so excited for me. So the number of times that I could say I thought she would be excited for me and then she wasn't, we could just fill a live stream with that. But she was like, but how in the world will you ever know you were good enough if you didn't get chosen by an agent and a real publisher? Like, you'll never know if you were good. And I just remember being so confused by that statement because I was like, yeah, but the readers will like it. Like, isn't that what ultimately matters? And that was my perspective. Her perspective was, if you're not chosen by a publisher, you're never going to be good. Like, no one will ever be able to objectively say you were good because you didn't get chosen by a publisher. But I was very much of the mindset of like, if I love it, there's going to be other people who love it. And if I put it out there with all my passion and excitement, it doesn't even have to be the best written book of all time. It just has to have a good story. And as long as I have that, I feel confident that somebody's going to like it. And what an adventure and what a cool thing. And for me, that was all the validation that I needed. So sometimes when you think about your own imposter syndrome and you think about your own goals, it can be helpful to take on this idea of like, I know that if I am a reader and I love it, someone else is going to love it too. And so just keeping that as your confidence as you move forward. So where did I get this shirt? It says Pretty Girls Read Books. I got this from Piper and Ivy. It's one of my favorite bookish t-shirt shops. I'll try to put it in the comments and I'll put it on I think it's owned by either sisters or a couple of women. And I love it. So Piper and Ivy is the name of the company. If you look it up, they have a lot of gardening kind of shirts, but they have a lot of reader shirts. So you'll see me working on that or wearing those. Sorry, I was reading that at the same time. You'll see me wearing their shirts all the time because I love them. So highly recommend. Okay, so I'm going to pull up a few comments before I move on to the next piece of this, but welcome, Mila. So glad you're here. I know this feeling makes writing the end difficult. Yes, yes, yes. And it's that idea of like, somebody's going to judge this, right? I have a gap between the story in my head and the story on the page. Cat Lady Laura, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly the taste gap, is like, the idea in my head is this perfect thing I know not everybody is a visual thinker or visual writer, but I always see it like a movie in my head. And a lot of times, the first spark of an idea for a new book or a new series is a scene. It's not usually the opening of the book, it's usually a scene somewhere in the middle. Like, I have this story that I started writing years ago when I also was writing The Disappearance of Vanessa Shaw that's called The Haunting of Luna Day. I hope someday I'm gonna get to finish that story because I have this is one that I hit, like, halfway through and gave up on, which we'll talk about. Um, but that idea still haunts me, ironically, from the title, but that came to me like a picture in my head of a girl dressed all in black who obviously did not belong in this pink and white bedroom that obviously looked like she's wearing Doc Martens that have seen better days, and she has black fingernails and, just obviously didn't belong in this super, super girly pink room, but she's walking in the closet and, like, touching her hands across the clothes, and it was just like a vision in my head, and I thought, "What's her story?" And that was the spark for that book. And sometimes when you have that spark and you have that idea of what it could be, and then you start to try to write it, especially as a draft, it's not gonna come out the way that you thought. It's not this masterpiece. And Stephen King talks about this in his book on writing as well, that he talks about, like, how there's always that fear that the idea that you have is never gonna translate into the story or the book the way that you imagined it, but sometimes it does, and that's really where the magic lies. Sometimes it comes out even better than you could have imagined, and this was Disappearance of Vanessa Shaw for me, is that I had this idea, I was really excited for it, it transformed and transformed, I hated it, I felt like I couldn't do it, there was huge gap between my skill and what I wanted to write, but then by the time it was done, it's one of the books that I'm most proud of because I feel like I pulled off what I wanted to do even better than I expected, and I can't say that for every single book that I've ever written, and that's gonna be true for you. Some of the books you write are gonna come out so much better than you ever expected, and some of them are gonna never quite live up to what you wanted. It doesn't make it worthwhile to abandon them all, right? To never finish, and, I think that it's learning when we talk about how do we keep going, it's about learning to understand the discomfort that comes along with those things that I mentioned. The discomfort of a couple of things. I wanna pull up, make sure I'm not, like I'm trying to read the comments too. Um, my whole closet is Piper and Ivy. Yeah, I love it. Me too. I have so many. The Muse Always Wins, that's my merch. Thank you for that. I was like, maybe I have my Muse Always Wins. I have my Muse Always Wins mug. Which is the idea also kind of goes, for those of you that were anybody here besides Jenna, I know several of you were around when this phrase came to life back in the like 2021, 2020 NaNoWriMo. Which year was it? I can't even remember. 2020, I think. 2021. Anyway, Muse Always Wins is something George has said to me for a long time because you can try to make your story a trilogy, but if it wants to be a 6-book series, it's just gonna be a 6-book series. Mama Keen, hey, 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 I was here. Yes, me, I was here. Thank you, thank you. I was there. Was it that long ago? I know, Dakota, it's like 6 years ago. It was 2020 or 2021. I feel like I can't fully remember, but I'm thinking maybe it was 2020 because Evie was so little. It's hard to remember. But that phrase stems from all of this of like sometimes we have this idea of how it's going to be, but it's just going to come out the way that it will come out, and the muse is going to win. The characters are going to talk to you. The characters are going to do things you don't expect on the stage, on the page, and the story may not come out the exact way that you expected it to, but if you stick with it, and this is the key, is that if you stick with it, it's going to eventually turn into magic, and it will eventually become something you will be so proud of. But if you consistently start stuff and never finish it, never see it to the end, you're never going to learn what that feels like. And so a bit of a calling out here, but if anybody is sitting here watching this and you have never finished a book, but you have started multiple 5, 10, 50 books, and you've never actually seen one all the way to the end, let me say again that you will never learn as much by starting 50 books as you will from finishing one. You will learn so much just in the process of finishing it. And it doesn't mean that by the time you get to the end, you're going to think this was a masterpiece and I am so good at this. But you will get to the end and there will be suddenly a different kind of clarity than you were expecting, where you will say, now I can start to see the pieces. And then it will become a different animal of, how do I make this good? How do I make this something I can be proud of? And this is why, I think the conversations that we have on this YouTube channel are so important, because so much traditionally there have just been conversations about, here's exactly how you do it. You're supposed to do it this way, then you edit this way. There's no room for anything different. But the truth is, some people fly through rough drafts and have no problem finishing them, but never edit them. Or some people edit books to death, that they will edit 5 million times and never think it's good enough, and then in the end abandon it because they think they can do something better. Some people will start draft after draft after draft after draft, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean you don't have the ability to do it. It just means that you need to, as an individual, identify the places where you're getting stuck or where you're getting stuck in a loop, and then try to make a decision for yourself of, do I actually want something different, or am I okay with this as my loop forever? And if you want something different, then you got to identify that loop and then find some tools to help you get past it. But I'm so good at starting again. Isn't that so true? So let's talk about that. But yeah, this is also true too. Finishing a book unlocks a new set of fears to overcome, but there's always a moment finally when you get to this I did it feeling. That is very wise and very true. Can't remember who said it, but I once heard someone say that the point of writing a book isn't as much writing the book as having the process of writing a book change you. And you know what? I'm not trying to get into a conversation about AI or an argument about AI, but I think that this is at the crux of why it's so important, even if you do choose to use AI in your process, that you do actually write your own words. And, again, I know that just even mentioning that is like opening a can of worms, because I don't want anyone to feel judged on this channel regardless. And I don't want to become like a hate circle or anything like that. But I just think even if you're using AI in your process, it's still important to get through the hard parts on your own and to use your actual brain to figure things out. And, there are all kinds of ways to use AI. But for me, I know that if I had used AI to write my books and just said, hey, write the next chapter, write the next chapter, write the next chapter, I never would have learned the skills or become the kind of person that I am today. And I feel like every single book changes me just a little bit, where I have to push myself in new ways. I have to overcome. And that's not something you can get necessarily outside of that process, honestly. And it's the same way of like, when you get into the gym, and this is not an experience I've ever had. Like, I'm not a gym person, but it is something that I would like to become, is more fit. So this has been on my mind, but there are no shortcuts to getting muscles and to getting fit and to having a healthy heart. Like, there's no shortcuts. You have to show up for it every day. And writing is the same way. We just have to get in there, and there's a mental side of it. There's a physical side of it. There's a creative side of it. And we have to just keep going, and we have to find our anchors and our tools to help us keep moving forward. And that is why we're here. That's why we're here. Okay. So after I opened a can of worms that I don't ever want to open, thank you for nice comments. I also don't know that I turned on subscriber only. So if this gets crazy, welcome to the crazy show. I'll try to put people in timeout if I have to. Finishing a project is like leveling up in a video game. We learn new skills to take on the next boss fight. Yes, 100%. And I think too that, you could Yes. Well, this is true too, Kelly. There are shortcuts, but also repercussions to taking shortcuts. That's probably true too, because there might be shortcuts, but then you might also injure yourself, or you might not have built muscle in a way that lasts, or other things like that. Mark Wahlberg would agree. Does he work out all day? I could not. However, I would love to be stronger, and we'll see. I had Pilates class, and I'm so sore. It's hard to sit walking up the stairs. I bet it hurts. Like when you've worked your legs really hard, it's hard to walk down the stairs because your legs are too weak and they wanna give out? Is that just me? I don't know. But this is wise right here. Growth comes after discomfort, and that kind of brings me back to the conversation, and I did scrabble some notes so that I wouldn't go too far off course here. But, okay, recapping that first half, why do we hit these points in our draft where we feel like we don't wanna go forward, we can't move forward, or that it's no good? And, I thought it's so funny because short story is like years of writing. If many of you might not know this, but probably most of you know, I met my husband playing a video game called EverQuest 2 back in 2006. So we're 20 years this summer since we met online. And he is, I mean, just the amazing partner for my life. And today is his birthday. So we're doing an extra little shout out to George. I would not be where I am right now without him for sure. And he was really one of the ones that encouraged me. He's like, "Why don't you, if you're not happy with your current job, what is it you would do with your life? Why don't you just move in with me and you can do whatever you want and I will support us?" Which turned out to be such an amazing gift because many of you know he several years after I moved in with him and we got married, I started having so much success in my book career that he was able to quit his job and now has never had to work again. So he was going to support me and now continues to support me and then I support the family. But anyway, he very early on identified this pattern that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So you can shout out in the comments if you have had this experience where every single book, there's a certain point that you hit that you're just like, I could collapse onto the floor of the bathroom, kicking and screaming like a toddler that this is the worst book ever written, that it's going nowhere, that I can't write, that I've lost my ability, that it'll never come together. And he quickly identified, where are you in the story? And I would always be somewhere around halfway. And he's like, "Okay, this is common. Let me give you the pep talk that you need because this is what happens." And it made me laugh so hard because somebody shared, I think in the Follow Fix group earlier this year, that Rebecca Yarros posted almost exactly that experience for herself working on, I don't think she was working on a Fourth Wing book. She was working on one of her contemporaries that was like, "Me. This is the worst book. I can't write. I'm a failure." Her husband comes in. "Where are you in the book?" "Oh, you're about halfway through. Okay, keep going. Here's a Diet Coke. Here's a pat on the back. Here's a hug." And it happens every single time. And this is a universal writerly experience. It might not be the midpoint. For some of you, it might be closer to the end. For some of you, it might be even more towards the beginning. But if you're sitting here and you are somebody who has been starting and restarting and restarting, can you identify about how many words you get into your manuscript before you give up? Like if you went back and looked at 10 rough drafts that you started in the past, are they all similar? Did you get 10,000 words into each of them, 30,000 words into each of them? It's worth looking at because if you can identify those patterns, you're going to be able to push through them a little bit better. Oh, you did, you shared that in the Coven on Facebook, so maybe that was where I saw it. I couldn't remember. So, yes, it's so funny because it's like you would never dream that somebody like Rebecca Yarros, who was probably the number one best-selling author of the last couple of years, has those feelings when she's writing because she has ultimate validation. She's making millions of dollars, selling millions of books. She's got TV deals and everything you could ever imagine on the biggest stages. She's super talented, and yet same thing, still having these moments where she feels like she's no good. And that kind of always shows us who don't have that same level of success that like we're normal and it's okay. And we got to keep going if we ever want to hit those higher levels of success. Aria says it's about 20K words for me. Yep. Rachel says 30K and 90K. Those are my breaking points. Mila, always different. Okay. I wonder if you can identify other patterns then in terms of what's happening. So let's talk about that just a little bit. So we tend to, I think, hit this point, and feel free to add more when you get in here. Act two, always act two, and then in the revisions as soon as I get closer to the middle. First of all, when things start to feel more difficult, when it starts to take more effort and it's not as fun as it used to be. That's where a lot of people start to feel this of like, words were flowing and now they're not, and that must mean that the story isn't any good, or it's taking more effort to figure out what happens next, so now it's harder than it used to be, right? It's like it might be fine to go for a walk every day, but the minute you ask yourself to run and it's 100 degrees, which might not be safe anyway, but you know what I'm saying? Um, it's harder. So it takes more willpower or more motivation to get to the same result because it's more difficult. And our brains are programmed for efficiency. And so we have to try to convince ourselves to keep pushing past. Yes. So Seth Godin has a book called The Dip, and talks about this kind of thing as well. And if you want to read that book, it's actually really good because he talks about how to know the difference between when to keep going and when to give up on stuff. So definitely a good read there. His books are all short and easy to read if you want to check them out. So the more difficult part, two, it got boring or repetitive. And this is not stuff that only applies to writing, by the way. This is kind of everything. YouTube, if you started a YouTube channel, could be the same way. It's all exciting in the beginning. It's the same way for relationships, since we're talking about George today. I mean, it's all easy and fun in the beginning because it's like butterflies and, oh my gosh, he touched my hand and this is so fun and I'm learning about his life. But 20 years into a relationship, there are some things that are boring and repetitive. It's like, now we're talking about what are we going to buy for the chickens? What kind of, did we get chicken feed this week? Whatever. And so it's the same way that a relationship starts to take a different kind of work in the middle, or 20 years in, than it did at the beginning. Is the same way with your relationship, with your work itself, with your book. It's going to take a different kind of motivation and maybe a different approach once you hit that midpoint, or that messy middle, or that place where you usually give up. Leanne says, is that last 20K? Is that last 20K? For sure. I tend to have the beginning and end figured out, but the hardest part is connecting. So that midpoint, that middle part. So it could be that it started getting boring and repetitive. And I'm not saying my marriage is boring and repetitive, but you know what I mean? All relationships eventually come out of that. That's why we call it a honeymoon period, right? If you're feeling stuck or unclear. So this goes in hand with that. It got boring or that it got too difficult. But if you're working, hey, Amy. Hello. Am I writing a book? Nope. Did I come to hear all Sarah says? Yes. Welcome, friend. So when you hit that point where maybe it's not necessarily that the words are hard, but you're just like, I don't know. I'm writing in circles. I don't even know what is supposed to happen next in the story. This is why things like NaNoWriMo, you see, or traditionally you used to see a lot of people start off really strong and then fade, is because the beginning seems really clear in our heads. Like it's the world building. It's the meeting the character for the first time. They meet their love interest for the first time, or they go through the portal, or the mystery is introduced and we're starting to have a little bit of fun with the detectives, or whatever, and you're writing whatever that genre is, and it's just flowing because you're introducing the characters. It's all that setup stuff. But then once you get to the point where, okay, now I'm in the meat of the book, the second act of the book, and things have to be happening that are going to lead me to the end point, and they need to be more connected, those sort of bookends. Now it's hard, and I don't know what is supposed to happen. And there's discomfort in that, right? This is where the personal growth, like you said, the growth comes from pushing through discomfort or finding your way through discomfort. It gets uncomfortable. And when our writing gets uncomfortable, we are searching for something that feels more comfortable, which is the easy, new, shiny story, or YouTube, or Instagram, or the game you were playing on your phone. Anything, even cleaning, sounds more interesting sometimes than the book that we were supposed to be writing that suddenly got hard. And so this is definitely one of those things that many writers will notice. And sometimes it's happening and we don't fully have awareness about it because we're just like, I don't know, I don't feel like writing. But the truth is you don't feel like writing because you don't know what happens next in the story. And it feels too hard to figure it out. Because what if it's wrong? And all those mental things that we were talking about start to come up. What if it's wrong? What if it's not good enough? The story's not coming out the way that I thought. And so we think, I don't want to work on it. that's that's a common thing. It also begins to become less rewarding to a degree. When we're in the beginnings of the story, it's full of dopamine for many of us. It's like, "Oh my gosh." And let me know too if you're here and you're like, "Nope, beginnings are always hard for me, but once I'm in it, I'm in a flow." Because like I said, even if I say something with through my assumptions and my perceptions doesn't mean that it's the truth, right? It just means this is partially true, but there could be other truths out there. So, when for me, when I'm first starting the story and I'm first plotting or I'm first writing those first scenes, it tends to go pretty quickly because, especially in a new series, it's different when I'm on book three or even book two. But at the very, very beginning, it's the fun part for me. And it's very, very rewarding. Lots of dopamine, lots of excitement, lots of internal reward for, oh, I got it. Listen to this character. This is so good. This is so good. But as we get to the middle and the endings, it becomes like, oh, now there's this pressure that it has to feel like a book and we have to have the plants and reveals and the things have to all come together and I have to close this up and I have to close this thread. And now there's a lot of things that my brain is working on all at once and it starts to feel harder. And that becomes a little bit less rewarding in terms of dopamine because every piece that you're working on feels difficult and you have that self-doubt of like, what if it's still not good enough? Well, that didn't turn out good and the words feel clunky. Beginnings are easy, endings are hard. Yeah, that's the way I feel too. Well, actually, if I really think about it, that's not exactly how I feel. Beginnings are easy, middles are hard, but once I make it through the middle and I can see the end, those last 10,000 words fly for me every time, almost every time. I always go back and rewrite them to a degree, but definitely feeling that in beginnings are easier for me. Oh, Genesis beginnings are hard for me until I find the best first line and then it clicks. So anything you can figure out about yourself and those patterns, it may not look like my patterns. Hey Ray, it's usually hard for me when it's done. That's when I'm like, ugh, what was I thinking? So the editing phase, the self-doubt that comes in once you've finished it, which is a whole different set of problems, right? A different set of emotional and mental issues. Okay, so let's talk about solutions because we've been talking about why. And of course, I focus on the why because sometimes you just have to see it to understand it about yourself. And once you begin to unravel what those patterns are and why it's happening for you, like the real core of why it's happening for you, then you can begin to think about solutions because you can't really solve it until you understand that it's a problem for you. So, um, yeah. The beginning of the story, especially the opening scene, is always a slog. This is similar to me too. The beginning of the writing process is fun. That first scene, I have a couple ways that I get over this, but I will rewrite it 5, 10 times over the course of writing. And every book is different too, as well. Okay, so let's talk about some of the tools to get over it. Because when we hit any reason we hit discomfort is usually why we quit or why it feels like we aren't writing the right story or we want to give up. And when you are in discomfort, your brain is going to look for something more comfortable. So if you are somebody who continues to resist writing, you feel a lot of resistance, or you hit a point and then you start something new instead of ever finishing, this is my message to you, is to start to understand how discomfort and where the discomfort's coming from relates directly to your desire to give up on it or to try something new, because this is humanity. This is the way most of our brains are programmed, or it may not even be like a neurotypical thing. It might just be that most of us are neurodivergent in some way, but so many writers, we are programmed this way that as soon as we have discomfort or it feels difficult or it feels boring or it feels like we're unclear about what's happening or it feels less rewarding, we're going to naturally go looking for something that feels more exciting, more fun, more rewarding. And that's usually a different story entirely. But if we're in a loop of rewriting, or starting something new every time, we're never going to get to our goals. So we got to find our way through it. We got to find our way through it. So one thing that our brains look for is novelty. And, this is something I have been criticized for through the roof, but at the same time, I just can't worry about it because novelty for me is always my out. It's like my escape hatch. That if something is starting to feel boring, don't start a new story, start a new plotting sheet, start a new set of note cards, put it up on your wall, shiny, happy little colorful post-it notes. So for me, the novelty of a new system is always something that's going to get me back on track. Another thing that I used to do, if your brain is in discomfort, this might be helpful for you, is a new plotting method entirely. So read another book on craft. If you're a learner, anybody familiar with strengths here will know if you have top 10 learner is my number 3 strength. And so I know that I get really motivated and excited when I get to learn something new. And so if I'm stuck on a plot, I can go pick up somebody else's book on plot and I can learn someone's new perspective or new system for how to plot a book, like plot gardening over here, 3-act structure over here, somebody else's perspective over here. And just the excitement of learning about something and then being able to apply it to, oh, number 1 learner, high five. So exciting, right? I know some people are like, kill me now. This is not my thing. I do not like reading books. I don't. Okay, Mila, also number 1. But yeah, it can also be research is the same way. For some people, for some of us, it can be a rabbit hole, right? That we don't get into. Oh, new writing program too, right? So try it in Scrivener, try setting up your Google Doc, but of course within boundaries, because the downside of that is you could just get stuck reading and reading and reading and not actually finishing anything. So we got to keep our eye on the goal. So what I would do is I would say, okay, I'm stuck. I don't know what happens next. So I'm going to go to someone else's new perspective, and the novelty of someone else's take, even if it's just watching someone else's video on plotting or someone else's spreadsheet of how they plot their book, I allow it to fill me up, to spark something new for me. And then that novelty is back. So I didn't need the novelty from a new story. I just needed the novelty from a new perspective on my own story. So that can be one tool to keep you going. Researching is my favorite way to not write. So this is another thing, is like, if you are excited for your story in the beginning, and then you've lost the dopamine, you've lost the reward, you've lost the fun, it's okay to give yourself a week of, okay, I'm going to go just get in, when you get in the bathtub and you get pruny, like your hands get pruny, just get pruny in the joy of research for a little bit. Just go dive into it like a bathtub and just live in it for a week and let it fill you up. We get so, and I know Rough Draft Challenge can make you feel this way too. So give yourself a lower goal if you need to. We get so wrapped up on the timeline. And yes, externally, the faster you can write, maybe the more successful you'll be, especially if you're self-publishing. But at the same time, if you get stuck for 6 months, that's not faster. And what I'm learning over and over again, is the lesson I've had to relearn many times, is that sometimes taking a break for an entire week and just allowing yourself to play that video game for a week or refill the well can give you that excitement back for the story. Yeah, get pruny in the joy. Exactly. Just allow yourself to immerse in it for a while until it's just so soaked in that it's affecting every cell of your body. And that can be good, but this is another piece of it, right? If I take that break, when I come back, I have to restart the entire novel because the voice is different now. I've never had that experience for myself where I feel like the voice is different, but I have had moments where I have learned a new system and then I've thought, oh, I started this wrong. But it always is in service for me, because I'm always like, I did actually start it wrong. This new perspective has unlocked something new, and now it's time to rewrite it. And then the story ends up better. But this is where it's so important to know your own patterns and your own way that you stay connected to your story. Because for some people, if you take an entire week off, it's going to be so hard to restart. Or if you get any kind of outside a motivation, or you're watching or reading other people's stories, it's going to affect the way that your voice shows up. So you got to know what advice is right for you and what advice is not right for you. Because some things that I say might be like, nope, I can't do that. That's not going to work. When I stop learning about how to write and then start, it's like jumping off a 10-meter diving board, scary but so satisfying. Yeah, yeah, I agree, I agree. And it can be uncomfortable because the learning part is easy, but it can also be something that sort of revs the engine a little bit. So like I said, know thyself, important. Another tool that can help when you hit that messy middle part is to just say to yourself over and over, minimum viable product. Lower the bar, take the expectations off, especially if you are feeling that gap between the way you wanted the story to be and the way your skill is putting it on the page. That if you're thinking, I have to give up because this story is terrible, then mentally just lower the bar and say, okay, it's terrible, and I'm just going to let it be terrible, and it can just be the minimum viable product. Doesn't matter what these words are, let's just get some words on the page. This can also be difficult to do, but it can really serve you in finally getting the engine going again, especially if you've just completely stalled. It's just giving yourself permission to suck. Just, it's going to be terrible, and that's okay, but at least I'm going to get words on the page, right? So that can be one tool. Minimum viable product, minimum viable product. Just repeat it over and over again. And every time you think this is the worst and it's no good and I have to give up because there's something better, I need to work on a different story, get back in there and just be like, it's just going to suck and it's okay. Another tool that can work, and feel free to put any of your tools that help you move past this sort of stuck part of your book. MVP, most valuable player, or minimum viable product. Yeah, it could be both. Could be both. You are the MVP of your story. Your story can be the MVP of products. I get lost in the world building of the story. Yeah, and I think it can be fun to get lost, and part of the balance of it is allowing yourself, when you start to feel bored or the story isn't coming together and it starts to feel hard, go back to the fun of the world building for a little bit so you can just feel some of that spark again. And once you feel sparked, then you naturally start writing again. You just have to be careful not to stay in one place too long. Like, don't stay in the stuckness too long. Don't stay in the world building too long. Remember that you always keep moving forward, keep moving forward. But another tool that has worked for me is writing out of order. Shocking. We're not supposed to do that. I love it. This is why, if you watched my video last year about different types of writers, one of them is the puzzler, and that is me. I love being a puzzler. I like writing out of order. If I'm stuck, then I just use my sort of mental movie to say, well, what's a scene I know is going to happen later? Even if it's just a small conversation, even if it's a kiss between my two main characters, even if it's like for A Mirror of Shadows, A Throne of Thorns, book 2, I have been skipping forward all over the place. And I have just little random pieces because I'm trying to just keep myself connected to the story. And eventually I'm going to have to go in and put them in a logical order, or I'm going to have to connect those threads. But I just have to sometimes skip ahead to a scene that I know. And a lot of times when I skip ahead to the scene that I know, it will unlock this scene that I was stuck on. I'll say, oh my gosh, this conversation, a secret came out that I wasn't expecting. Now I have to go back and make that make sense. Let me connect that thread. Because ultimately, you know, those murder boards where people are like putting those red threads all over the place and they're connecting things. That's what we're doing as writers. No matter which genre you're writing, there's all these threads that are going in different places. And if you're at a point where you're just like, I don't know where any of this is going, sometimes just going ahead and being like, let me see what's going to happen at the end. You're definitely a puzzler. Yeah. I don't know if I don't think I made it up, but I've never really heard anyone else be using that either. One time in RWA, like long time ago, somebody called it a puzzler. And I was like, yes, because I'd only ever heard pantsers or plotters. And then someone said puzzler. And I was like, that sounds like a Batman villain. And I'm so here for it because I feel like that's who I am. And there are times when I just am like, I have to focus. I have to write in order. But when I get stuck, writing out of order is so, so helpful for me because it unlocks things. If you've never tried it, it might be worth a shot, because if you're resisting the writing, it's just like candy, right? If you're resisting eating anything, if I offered you a cookie, would you eat? Maybe. If you like sweets or like whatever your favorite food is, it might get you to eat. So if I tell my kids there's mac and cheese on the plate, they will come running down to the stairs. So in a way, in a way, just bribing yourself with that future piece of story can be helpful. So another tool that you can use. Another tool is to write with other people, because when we are just in our own little bubble and we're all alone and we're having these negative moments where we're just like, um, this is the worst. I suck. This story is terrible. And I know not everybody has a George or a partner at home that is supporting them. Uh, Come into the writing communities that you belong to. We have Heart Breathing's writing community. We have sprints that are going on every day. Next weekend, we have 3 full days virtual writing retreat. I don't know if Angela announced it yet. She's here right now, but we're going to Turkey. We're going to be at the beach in Turkey, and it's going to be fun. It's a virtual trip, so feel free to like learn about Turkish culture and cuisine and all of these beautiful things. But we're going to be in Turkey for 3 days. And so all day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday of next week, we will have writing sprints going all day. And it's magical. I think there's a link in the description that I always put to the Facebook group or to the calendar or something, but if it's not in there, let me know and I'll add it. But we have a Facebook group of almost 10,000 people, and then we have all of the sprints that are happening 2 hours at a time come into this YouTube space. So some of them are on my channel if I'm sprinting. And honestly, lately I have been thinking about doing a third YouTube channel called the Heart Breathing's Writing Community YouTube channel, so that some of our sprinters can come take over that channel and we could do writing interviews and things. So something that's been on my mind is to have a separate channel for live streams. No guarantees, but just randomly mentioning it. But we're going to go to Turkey and we are going to write together. So sometimes that body doubling, that accountability of knowing that someone else is there, there's a timer, they're running it, can be really, really helpful to keep moving forward when it comes to getting your writing done. So regular meetings with a critique group, a sprint group, joining Heart Breathing's writing community, finding other, someone else is suffering there with you. Some people are, I for a while was writing with my friend Ines Johnson, who is amazing, and Theodora Taylor and Leslie Penelope. I need to get back to that, but the timing didn't fully work for me anymore. But they were writing every morning, and I would join them sometimes on Google Meet. And it's like just having some people there. A few times I've met up with Angela and Casey and Cassie to do Discord server sprints. If you go into my Discord server, there is also like a sprinting channel, so you can always sprint with the bot that's in there. There's always a million ways to do it. So go ahead and join in if you can, because just having that accountability is, the writing sprints. It really is a game changer. And I'm so grateful to people like Miranda, Rita, and, Cassie, or not Cassie, but Angela. We have 3 Sarahs, I think, that are sprinting now, and Jen and everybody that sprints for us. We technically have like 3 Sarahs, 2 Jennifers. We are going to be bringing in new sprinters as well, coming up in the mid-year. So that should be really fun. All right. Another piece is what I call a zoom out. So something else that can help you if you're stuck and you're struggling in a place that you're like, I just don't know if it's a lack of clarity. Sometimes just zooming out and being able to let me look at what the whole story is so far. And one of my dear friends, Jenna DeLeon, she writes cozy mysteries, and at the beginning, she's pantsing it. She's just writing, it's going, it's whatever's coming up. But she said partially because she writes mysteries, but at some point in the story, she hits a point where she's like, I don't know. And now I have to start plotting what happens next. And so it's this combination of letting it flow, realizing when you get stuck. And then she does a zoom out where she says, okay, let me take note of all the chapters I've written so far. Let me figure out what the ending is going to be, and then start connecting those threads between what I've written and what's coming next. Then she can write the rest of it. And so sometimes what you need, especially if you've been pantsing it and now you feel like there's all these threads and I don't know where it's going, is to just sit down and create a little chart for yourself, like my big paper chart, or it could be last year um, I did a series here on YouTube about how to finish your rough draft. And I think that was during the July months or whatever. You can go in there inside our Heart Breathing's resource library. There is a Google Doc that is basically set up to figure out how your story comes together. What are all the story threads? What are all the plot points? And that can be very helpful. It's just a free tool. If you're not on my newsletter list, you can join it down below. There should be a link to or just go to heartbreathings.com and you can get all of our free resources. And one of them is that spreadsheet. So if you're not a paper person, then you can put it in that spreadsheet and keep track of all the stuff that's happened so far. But see, she's not fully pantsing the mystery. She's pantsing the setup. And so when she gets to a point where she's like, okay, that's all the setup that I can do. Here's the person that got murdered. Here's the thing, but I don't know how this is going. Now she has to plot it. So it's a hybrid system, right? And I'm sure there are some people that totally pants, but for her, it's more helpful to just get the momentum and then plot later, rather than saying, I'm going to plot from the beginning, where she used to get stuck. So some of that can be manipulated from what traditional, like, you don't have to be a pantser or a plotter. You can be a hybrid of both. And really most people, I think, are. So finding those pieces of your process, but zooming out can be helpful. This one is going to be not exactly the best for everybody, but if you can trust the revision process. So this kind of goes back to minimum viable product. However, for some of you, you're like, I don't trust my revision process. Some of you are like, I've never been in revisions before in my life, so I can't trust it. However, kind of put it off to future you, right? If you feel like, I don't know how this is coming together, this doesn't make any sense, this work was the worst I've ever written, all of this is terrible. If you can get into a mental space, this helps me a lot, of just being like, I'll figure it out in revisions. I'll figure it out in revisions. I'll figure that out later. I'll figure that out when I'm editing, and just keep moving forward. It can get me past those hardest parts of the rough draft, because when I'm stuck, because I feel like it's terrible, I have to just tell myself there's a future version of myself who will know how to handle this. And I'm just going to pass that off to her in the future. And sometimes that can be a tool that helps. If you are struggling, is there a possibility you can summarize the tips? Yeah, we can do like a one sheet or something. I can't do it right now though, because I'm going to be packing after this. But I will try to get you just a quick one sheet, or I'll try to type it out real quick. When we are starting to lose interest, we're starting to feel like it's no good anymore, we're starting to feel like we aren't any good, that it's not coming together. Sometimes what can be helpful too is going back to the heart of the story. When we get to a point where it feels hard and it feels heavy, and it's the opposite of that beginning excitement of the story, this is where that part hits, where we have that gap, where it's like, I was so excited of what this story could be, and now I feel like it's all crap and it's not coming together, and we just want to give up. Sometimes if we can just put ourselves back in the energy of that beginning reason that we started the story in the first place, it can help us keep moving forward. So when I think about the heart of the story, I think about what made me want to write this story in the first place. So Cassie, I don't know if she's here still, was just talking about having read Sunrise on the Reaping. And she was like, oh my gosh, what an amazing author. Now I want to write a dystopian. And, this is part of why we all write, is that we have something that has made us excited to be a writer. It's, for me, I was playing Left 4 Dead video game with my sister, and it was like, every single night we were on the Xbox playing that game, and I just started thinking about zombie series, and I could not get it out of my head. And so I wrote a zombie series, and that is part of how we get inspired for our stories. And every single time I would start to get stuck, I would just go back and play that game. Similar type of thing to whenever I would get stuck writing Beautiful Demons and that story world, I would go back and binge watch other teen shows like Vampire Diaries, Veronica Mars, anything that has that same kind of vibe, like Riverdale, anything. And it would get me excited for that style of storytelling. Like when Wednesday came out, doesn't mean my story is like Wednesday necessarily, but it just means it's that same style of storytelling. And so if I can immerse myself in it for a weekend and binge watch an entire season of it, then I get more excited for my own story again. So that's like going back to the heart of the story. Another thing that you could do in that situation of getting back to the heart of the story is actually just sit down and ask yourself, why did I start this story in the first place? And if you're a journaling person, just start journaling. Why do I love this story? Why was I so excited to write a murder mystery? Or why was I so excited to write a romance like this? And almost like hyping yourself up to get back into the fun and the heart of why you wanted to write it in the first place. And then another journaling question you can put in there is, I'm so excited for readers to experience blank. And then start thinking about the scenes, the way you want your readers to feel, the twists and turns. Like if I were doing that for myself for A Mirror of Shadows or Throne of Thorns, I would sit and I would write, I cannot wait for the readers to experience the way that these twists are going to come about, or this specific match that I have coming up, or this big twist and turn. And I would be more specific about it, but I don't want to spoil it, but just start writing about it. All the things that got me excited, all the vision that was in my head for what this story could be in the first place, getting back into that excitement and that feeling. And that again is just like, those lawnmowers that you had to like pull, or like a chainsaw, you had to pull the chain. It's just like pulling your own chain. Just keep pulling it and revving it until it starts the engine back again. And that is so valuable. So what can you do to get back into the heart? It could be journaling. It could be immersing yourself in readers. We won't tell. I know, but I want you to experience it. So like that's the fun of it, right? I think it is one of the most effective ways is to bring back that novelty. Because remember, I said so many of our brains are, once it becomes less rewarding or more difficult, or we're sitting in discomfort, we lose interest. Or it's just, I've been focused on this book for too long. It's starting to be boring. It's repetitive. I want a new story. I want something that feels more fun. Instead of looking for a new story, figure out how to make the story you're working on fun again. And whatever that looks like, novelty, getting to the heart of why you loved it, immersing yourself in the research or the world building again, going back and reading what you wrote, working on it with other people, telling other people about your story, anything to make it exciting. Gamify it. Hello, we all have seen these to do, doing, done. This is just a way to trick my brain into having fun with my stories. That's all it is. And so if you can find fun ways to trick your brain into enjoying it, that's your escape hatch from being stuck. Some authors will put a quote like, hero does something to get unstuck here and move on, or they use a special word. So for me, it's always XX. So mine will look like this. I'll just put, because I never have an XX in my story. So I'll just write XX, make this make sense. Or hero fights with Harper, or whatever. And I'll just put that on. And then when I go to my revisions, I just search for XX, and it makes it really easy to find them, right? And then I can fix them as I go, or I can make a list of all the things. And sometimes I will do that with the scenes that are hardest, or the scenes that I can't figure out. And sometimes I'll have a rough draft that's just full of that. Now, it becomes a different conversation for a different time of how do you actually finish that. And I do actually want to. So a couple people sent me a request to talk before we go. Oh, Rebecca's here. I'm a bracket kind of girl. Make this not sound stupid. Yes. XXX1, XXX2. Oh, Rana's got the triple X's going, and then put notes on the side. Yeah, that's a good idea. Anything that helps you search, but you wouldn't want to use something that appears commonly in the story. So brackets, asterisks, money sign, whatever you want to put in there, XXX, anything that you can search for easily to help you put together when, find them at the end. So those can be good. I know some people will use like 3 asterisks or, something like that. So Arctic Valkyrie is also a bracket girl. Is this helpful? I am hoping this conversation is good, but I did have a couple people say, "How do I get my excitement back for revisions as well?" And I think you can use a lot of these tools. So if you're, let's say you finished your rough draft and now you're working on revisions and it's a total rewrite or it's a total slog, you've lost your spark for the story, you feel like you don't know where it's going. I think a lot of this can be applicable as well to that situation, which is number one, zooming out. Zooming out, zooming out. Because once you have the story is completed, you have all the pieces, but sometimes it can just feel really hard, like your brain is sliding on the information, like I can't hold it all in my head because there's too many things. It's like George and I are listening to The Wheel of Time in audio together, and we're on book 10, and he'll say, "Oh, Regina, blah, blah, blah." And I'm just like, "Who's that? There's 5,000 names in this book. Why are there so many people to keep track of?" It just slides around in my head, and I have to keep looking people up to figure out who they were and what book we saw them in last. But it's huge epic fantasy, so we're figuring it out. Usually it's bracket. What the heck was I thinking? Oh yeah, number sign, pound sign is also a good one because that wouldn't appear in your story otherwise, right? But anyway, it's if you can find some way to visually make it make sense, where you've either got a spreadsheet that it's all out on, or like the plotting grid or something like that, and make it as colorful or as beautiful or as aesthetically pleasing as you can, because this is going to give your brain that little bit of dopamine that says this is a fun thing. Like, really immerse yourself in the parts that you find fun about it. Another piece that gets me through revisions is communication. So if you're high in communication in Clifton Strengths, if you're familiar with those, that can also be helpful. Is if you're trying to figure it all out by yourself, it can feel really, really hard. But if you get into conversation, like take a critique partner, a best friend who understands the genre, pull a reader out of your reader group who understands the genre and is willing to talk to you about it, and just start talking about where you're struggling in the story. And a lot of times just putting words to it, even if you don't have somebody to talk to, open a voice recorder and start talking to yourself. Because sometimes that change of actually talking it out can be really helpful. Another thing that you could do is put it out on some place that you have to stand up to look at it, because there is actual scientific evidence that your brain works through problems differently when you're looking down versus when you're standing and it's on the wall. And so sometimes that can be a big help as well, of just seeing it, like big plotting wall, here's where I see it. And it can feel that novelty, a new system. It can make it exciting all over again. But I'll talk more about that specific thing about revisions as we move in to other live streams this month. But hopefully that was good. I think, did I have any other notes to make? I think that was the majority of it. Oh, I did have a thing that was just like, make it fun. A side part to that is, if you can gamify and you can give yourself rewards, if you're a rewards person, that can be helpful. Another thing that can motivate some people is competition. So sometimes just rough draft challenge where you say 25K, I'm going to hit it, is good enough. But for some people, it's really, really helpful to go in with a friend and be like, I bet I can hit 25K by the end of the month. Can you? Who can do it faster? And sometimes that can really start your engine and get excited too, and provide that bit of novelty, just like all in good fun. I wrote new tech. Why did I write new tech? Oh, this was kind of like the new, somebody was talking about new software or other things like that. A new Google Doc template, something that looks pretty, that can often help. And then I also wrote, my final tip that I just kind of scribbled down was Side Story Saturday, because we were just talking about this in the follow through fix. Is I had a really good friend who was always balancing different aspects of her project. So she always had one book that was in edits, one book that was in drafting, and one book that was in plotting. 3 different books always going at the same time, and usually a 4th book that was in the midst of being published and promoted. So she's always working on 4 books. And then she also had what she called Side Story Saturday, which is if I hit all my goals for the week and I get everything done I was supposed to do on Saturdays, I can just play. I can write a short story. I can work on a different book than a different genre. I can work on a new pen name. And Saturday was her day to just have lots of fun. And so for some people, this can be really helpful as well. It's like if you're always tempted to jump ship and start a new book, we had somebody in the early days that said, like in the early parts of this live stream, that was saying he was working on two different projects at once. And so that can sometimes be the thing that will unlock it for you, especially if you are somebody who just gets bored really easily with your story, but you also just keep moving over and over to different things. You can say, I've got two stories and I get to work on this one. And then when it starts to feel hard or boring, I go work on the other one. And inevitably, that one's going to start to feel hard or boring too. And I go back to the other one. Now, what do you do if you end up with two stories that feel stuck? You got to start looking at some of these other tools. But sometimes using it as a reward can be helpful of like, you know what? I do feel like I want to work on something new. I have this shiny object, but I can only work on that on the weekends when my main work is done for the week. But any little tools that you can employ to help you keep going is worth its weight in gold. Gamify. Remember that I set up rewards. Go use them. I got Starbucks today for my first reward. Yay, that's so exciting. I work on two stories at a time and it helps when I get stuck. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that. I have tried in the past to work on two. It's not always super effective for me because I tend to start to panic about my timeline, which is a totally different emotional and mental side of it. All right, you guys. I think that is it for our conversation. Thank you all so much for being here, for just kind of hanging out and talking about imposter syndrome earlier this week, and now talking about how to get through. Why do I keep hitting this point where the book is bad? And I think the main takeaway is understanding that just because it started to feel hard does not mean that it's not good, does not mean that it's stuck, does not mean it was the wrong story. It just means that your brain, for some reason, has either found it more difficult or it has less novelty or you're stuck or it's boring. And there's some other thing that makes you think the next story will be better. And that's always a lie. The next story it's not always a lie. The next story might be better, but eventually that one's going to get hard too, and you're going to want to abandon it. So pay attention to your own patterns and try to come up with your own toolbox based on anything you've heard that's worked, anything that you've experimented with that worked, and listen to your own intuition too of, you know what, why don't I try this? Why not? Right? Anything that keeps us moving and that keeps like revving our engine is worth exploring and seeing if it can work for us. Sometimes it's also like going on a writing retreat, getting immersed into your world for a few days. That can be helpful. So if you want to do that, come join us for the Heart Breathings writing retreat next weekend, and we'll be live Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Angela will probably post a schedule on Thursday for everybody to see, and that will be in the Google Drive as well. And, as a side note, like I was saying, this kind of thing happens in your career too. It's not just writing, self-publishing. Same thing. Eventually it's going to feel like, oh, this is such a slog thing. Like even a book signing could be really exciting the first time you do it. And then later it starts to feel like, oh, this feels difficult or it feels complicated or it feels just uncomfortable. So we have to just keep finding tools to keep moving us forward. And one of the best tools that you can employ in self-publishing is my course, Publish and Thrive. So this is my little pitch here at the end, but we are opening doors to Publish and Thrive next weekend. I'm so excited. Alumni, you got an email from me this week about some changes that we're making because we're moving from Teachable to Kajabi. So we're going to be making that switch this week. So you want to keep your eye on your emails for that if you're wanting to participate in this next round of the course. And if you have been looking to self-publish, whether you have finished your first book or not, we have people in the class that are still working on their first book. that have said, I'm so glad I took it early because now I've got a really good idea of how I'm going to start promoting myself. But also, this is one of the most comprehensive, if not the most comprehensive self publishing class on the market. And it's also one of the lower priced ones that's out there because I want it to help you get your books on the shelf. So if you've been thinking about it and you want to join the wait list, there is a link to the waiting list down below. Or if you're on my email list, you will get a notification about doors opening next week. If there are other topics for Rough Draft Challenge, like getting through things like that, that you want to do live streams on in the future, please send me your ideas. We are going to meet up again towards the end of this month, July 26th, and we're going to talk about how to actually finish, how to keep up with it, not just during a Rough Draft Challenge, but how to actually finish it and what to do and why your story really matters. So we'll have one more live stream coming up later this month. Otherwise, Anna says, alumni here, so comprehensive, lifetime access. Publish and Thrive is amazing. You won't regret it. It's going to be so good. It's going to be so good. And you'll notice alumni are like, can't wait because you get to go through it free every time. So it's going to be really great. Hi, Diana. All right, you guys. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for you. I will not be around as much in the internet this week because I'm flying to Minneapolis and I will be there for the majority of the week. But I will see you guys next weekend for virtual writing retreat. Yay! I'm signing up for Publish and Thrive. I cannot wait to have you in there. It's going to be amazing. All right, you guys. I will see you next time. Thanks for joining me on Saturday for this conversation. And of course, for everybody on the replay, big shout out to you for coming back and watching this on replay. And I will see you guys next week. All right. Bye, everybody.